Is CrossFit a good or bad way to train? One of the things I've learned over the years is if you want to get attention, you either be first or you be controversial. So I guess if I'm going to make a really good YouTube channel, I need to work on the lighting, of course, and an intro video. But other than that, I need to be super controversial. So I'm going to pick something that is controversial. I wouldn't say super controversial. Is CrossFit good or bad? My answer probably isn't going to really get me many more subscribers. The reason I actually bring this question up is, besides the clickbait, is people have asked me this over the years from the weightlifting world, and then CrossFitters that would come train with us, as us meaning the weightlifting club, and then just students over time have asked me about CrossFit. And I'm going to use CrossFit really is less about CrossFit, even though I'll highlight a couple of things about it, but more about just training in general. So is CrossFit good or bad? It's the wrong question. The question at least is incomplete. Is CrossFit good or bad for you? That's the question. You could insert any training program. Is powerlifting good or bad for you? Is Olympic style weightlifting good or bad for you? Is bodybuilding good or bad for you? Is Pilates good or bad for you? It depends factor, again, when we're talking about coaching philosophies, and it's kind of what this video series that I've been putting together, reflecting on coaching, is this is important. It really does depend. There may be times of the year where a CrossFit style type of training or CrossFit itself may be applicable, may be important, maybe part of a plan that makes sense. So early in a training cycle for an athlete, perhaps, doing some tissue prep and lots of general preparatory movement and moving in different planes and, doing all this type of density training, building work capacity can be really valuable. Then moving to a powerlifting, to Olympic style weightlifting if needed, plyometric training, so on and so forth. So that could be part of a yearly plan. If somebody would like to get in shape and be, have that feeling of team, and that's one thing CrossFit does really well, is it actually violates a lot of the things in the research literature that I've seen that bolsters program adherence. So, people like air conditioning, comfort, cost, the difficulty of training isn't really hard. CrossFit does all those things wrong, if you will, but yet people still do it. And one of the reasons is, I would say the biggest reason, is the community that's built. I saw a TED Talk a while ago. I can't remember the gentleman's name. He was an officer in the military, and he was talking about non-combat. Very important that you say that we designate between the two here, but non-combat PTSD, excuse me, and how really what his observation was, and you can take this for what it's worth, is that it was loss of team, where a lot of these individuals were returning back from deployment. That's what they were struggling with, this loss of common goal, working together. And I can, as a collegiate athlete in a very not as, important scale, if you will, and we see this in the research literature, is the death of, identity, coming out of working together as a team. And I remember being a college football player, and my last day, it's like you realize you're not Jason, the football player anymore. You're just Jason. That's it. Who are you now? You've been an athlete your whole life. You've worked with athletes, especially in team sports, where you've had a common goal. You work together. You'll do things that you'd never do on your own in terms of how hard you're training. And now that's gone. And so team and community is powerful, and CrossFit has done a good job of building that. And so I would encourage any coach to do a good job building community in their teams, even if their team might be track or weightlifting. We built a nice community over the years. And our community team now, that in the way some of these weightlifters actually taken the team and are running with it now, that I've stepped away from coaching the community team, and it's fantastic to watch because they built community and they pushed each other, and that's been positive. So CrossFit does an amazing job of that, in my opinion, take it for what's worth, of building community, and that's why people adhere to it, even though the training is very, 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 very challenging. But in terms of, if we get away from those type of aspects, which are very important, but if we just look at the programming itself, we're like, well, how could you use those weightlifting movements in density training? And I would argue you have to be careful with that. You have to be careful with how you present those. But this is where it comes down to two important factors when you evaluate programming: is the program itself, does it have progressive overload? Does it match the individual's current state of training? I've seen this in strength conditioning in general over the years, of taking a D1 university's training program and applying it to your high school athletes, lower level college athletes. Just because it was a D1 program, one, doesn't mean it was good for those D1 athletes, and two, it's probably not a good program for your athletes unless you are also coaching D1 athletes of a similar level, because there's levels in D1. And so this is where, program evaluation is going to be important. And the person who does the program evaluation is ultimately the person that, and the ultimate evaluation of a method is the coach. It's the coach. I've seen bad CrossFit coaches, and I've seen good CrossFit coaches. They knew how to scale things. They didn't try to push people into skills they weren't ready for. They adapted WODs for people that weren't ready yet. Their mobility wasn't there. They didn't push them into things they weren't ready for. I've seen good and bad powerlifting coaches that have done the same. I've seen good and bad Olympic weightlifting coaches that have done the same. I've seen good and bad strength conditioning coaches that have done the same. I've seen good and bad personal trainers that have done the same, both good, things that made sense and things that didn't make sense. I've been good and bad at different times of my career as a coach and personal trainer. So, I think it's the wrong question, or at least an incomplete question, to say, is CrossFit good or bad? Is it good for you? If you're an athlete, again, going back to that, and you need to gain muscle mass and gain size, and you're a guy in particular, probably CrossFit's not the way to go. But as a female athlete, it's possible that CrossFit could be a good fit for you, depending on the coach and the programming, if he or she knew what your goals were. It may or may not be a good idea. But again, the coach is going to be the one that changes the programming or evaluates you and says, this is the direction we need to go. So CrossFit's just, it's a programming method. I know it's a sport too, but it's a programming method for when we talk away from the sport itself. But in terms of other athletes and general fitness training, it is really dependent on the coach. Small side note then on coaching. Credentials are great. I have a PhD, certified strength conditioning specialist, national level weightlifting coach. That's all great. But it still doesn't mean I know everything as a coach. Now, the weightlifting one in particular requires that I've coached athletes at a certain level and a certain number. So at least I have some experience. But the other ones don't say anything about how much I've coached. I've met PhDs that have never worked with a human being, and they're an exercise scientist. They've never trained somebody in their life. And so, that you'd have to evaluate. They say, they have a PhD in exercise science. They must know everything. No, they don't. The CSCS is a great certification from National Strength Conditioning Association, but it doesn't mean you've worked with anybody. The CSCCA is a little better because they require you to work with somebody. And I mean, that's a point of contention at times. At least you have somebody who's mentoring you and you're actually working with people. And that's what's missing many times. And when we evaluate coaches, it's not, woohoo, I got my level 1, which is great. And I think that's important to have those. Don't get me wrong. I think those entry-level certifications are very important because it shows just some basic competency. But after that, you're going to have to do your homework, and I'd want to know who or how long somebody's been training. And even if I was evaluating a successful barbell coach, let's say, it wouldn't be necessarily, you've worked with, so-and-so that's gone to these high-level meets. How many people have you worked with and of different levels? Because if you're, hey, I'm not really a national level weightlifter, and I just want to learn weightlifting, you need to evaluate if that coach has worked with a lot of people like you, because he or she may not be a good fit for you if they're used to working with athletes that are trying to qualify for international weightlifting teams. Now, they could be, but they may not be. And so, unfortunately, it's not like medical school, some of those other fields in fitness. It's kind of the Wild West that certifications, you can literally buy one for $40 and have no experience. They mean something, but they don't give you the complete picture. So even if you're evaluating back to our model of CrossFit, you could say, they have a level 1 CrossFit and they own a box. That must mean they know stuff. Not necessarily. Now, it doesn't mean they aren't a great coach. It just means that they've met the minimums. You'd have to evaluate how long they've been training people. Have they trained people like you? Watch their programming. Is it successful? And that goes for any training method. I'm picking on CrossFit because that's the question I usually get. But I think it's not just about CrossFit. It's about any training. Personal trainer. How long have you been doing this? How many people you work with? I don't need to see the pre-post pictures as my only evaluation tool, although that's helpful. The follow-up question I'd ask of that, and this is why I like RP, by the way, is, okay, Sally lost or Dave lost all this weight in 6 to 8 weeks, but how does Dave or Sally look now? And not everybody's going to stick to a program even a successful coach can provide, but I'd want to know that at least there's some support for those individuals as they move beyond the post picture, that they can learn how to maintain the changes that they've seen. Those are good questions to ask a personal trainer, perhaps, that's helping you lose weight. So just some things to think about. I understand the question, but it's incomplete, And there's, like anything else, it's not that simple to say yes or no, CrossFit's good or bad. It really is dependent upon some other factors that as an individual, you're going to have to do the work to evaluate if CrossFit or any other training method is a good fit for you. And that may change from year to year. It may change, again, if you're an athlete, from cycle to cycle.